Here's another one that came in by email. This person says, I have some oil painting brushes that dried all out of shape and now they don't work right. Can you help? Well, let's show you some shaping exercises. Well, one thing we know, just like if your knife's not sharp enough to cut into a tomato, if your brushes are out of shape, they're not going to work right for you. So I'm going to show you how a process that you can go through to get those brushes in good shape. Now, this works for the bristle brushes. The synthetic brushes may or may not work by this method. Watercolor brushes, I wouldn't use this method. So I'm looking at bristle brushes when I'm talking about this. The hog bristle brushes work best. This is the kind of thing this person's talking about. When the brush dries and it has crooks and turns in it, and sometimes you might even have your brushes dry where the bristles are all misshapen and turn like downward and curled, that sort of thing. So that's really not a workable brush, either one of these. So what you want is the brushes to be reshaped so that when they dry, you have something like this. You have a nice chisel tip to work with, no matter what the shape of the brush is. So I've got 6 steps that I go through to reshape brushes, and I'll take you through those, and then you try it, and I bet you'll see that it works for you too. For one, we go back to Murphy oil soap. It's the best stuff I know for cleaning brushes and for conditioning brushes, and it's not very expensive like a lot of the soaps that are made for brushes. So this is has been my workhorse for keeping my brushes in good shape for many years. Now, the first thing is to soak those brushes in Murphy overnight, at least overnight, and if they're really bad shape, it doesn't hurt to soak them for a day or two so that you get them good and covered. When you well, this is about what you'd want to do. You want the brush to at least, let's see if I can show you, want the brush to at least soak in this stuff up to the metal part of the brush, which is called the ferrule. Next thing, we'll just push this aside and take the brush. Next thing is to remove the Murphys from the brush first, and I like to just scrape the excess Murphy off back into the container, and we'll just work with this brush. And then with paper towel, pull the excess Murphys out of the brush. This just expedites the whole process. Get as much of the Murphys out of the brush as you can with a paper towel, like that. Next thing is to thoroughly rinse Murphys out of the brush using lukewarm water. Now I've got a water container here, and this is another way if you if you don't have running water, you can just get a container like this, but you want to be sure that all the Murphys is rinsed out of the brush. So let's see, I think I probably got, and you can tell if you run your fingers over the brush like this, if it still feels slick, then all the Murphys is not out. So you'll need to continue, and under running water you can actually make this happen, where you're sure that you get it all out of the brush. If you don't get it all out of the brush, the other process may or may not work quite so well. So this is a good thing to take some time and go carefully with. I think that's pretty much it. The next thing is pull as much of that water out. Get as much of that water out of the brush as you possibly can. So this is the way I like to do it, just by folding paper towel over and using my thumb and finger pressing as I move the brush back and forth, and then pulling it towards the tip of the brush to get as much of that water out as I possibly can. Now I'm going to get another piece of paper towel, because the next process is what actually shapes the brush. When it comes out of the Murphys, it's not going to be in the shape. It's probably still going to be the shape that it was in when you put it in. But good old Ivory hand soap. Now I recommend Ivory because it doesn't have those creams and things in it that a lot of the soaps have. those creams will not work quite as well. So you need just a plain old-fashioned ivory soap. There's nothing in the world but soap. And we begin with as much of that water pulled out as we can. We begin by really, you can just misshape the brush whatever you want to. You want to get that, I'll hold this down so that you can see it a little bit better. We want to get that as lathered as we possibly can. Now, if it's too wet still, then you put, that's not, that I've got all the water out of it really, really good. But I want to get that just as saturated with that soap as I possibly can. So I really go to the extremes. If the brush is badly out of shape, I'll really go to the extremes on that. And then pull, we want that soap everywhere. So we want to get it on the inside. See what I'm doing right there? We want to get it on the inside really well and on the outside really well like that. Then with a paper towel like this, we pull that out. Just pull it out like that. Now, then we can take the brush between our fingers and our thumb like this and shape it. Now, if the brush is not really, if the brush is in no worse shape than this one was, then I'm able to pull that to an absolutely sharp edge and really shape it nicely and let it dry. I can put it in my brush container or something like that and let it dry upright like that. It's going to take it a good 12 to 24 hours to get thoroughly dry, but that's not the end of the process. After the brush has been thoroughly dry, like this one is, before you start painting, you got to get that soap out of the brush. And this is the way to do that. Just across your fingers, bring the brush back and forth, and you can also do this sort of thing. You see it holds its shape. You can do this sort of thing, and once you're sure that all that soap is out of the brush, then you can start painting. You'll find that you'll have a lot of control. Now there's one more thing, and that is when you go through this process, if the brush is still misshapen, if it's still you've got it thoroughly lathered with this soap. Well, I shouldn't say lather so much because you don't see the lather. If it comes up as a lather, there's too much water in there. If there's too much water, the process won't work. But you need it to be absent of water but damp enough so that that soap sticks inside those bristles and holds them together. See, like that. See, this one was not that bad out of shape when I first started working with it, so I'm able to pull it, and just by pulling it like that, I'm able to shape it. Now, another way to test that is you don't see any wet on my fingers. So I had pulled all the water out, and that the drier it is, less water's in there, and more soap that's in there, the better it's going to work. But so, what if it doesn't? What if the brush was so badly out of shape that it still wanted to do funky things like that? Well, there's one other thing that you can do, and I learned this from Richard Schmid, and that is you take a clip like this, and they make these in different sizes, so you get the smaller ones for smaller brushes and the larger ones for larger brushes. Any kind of stiff board, a cardboard, this is watercolor paper, any kind, and just something that you can bend like that. And the best way to do that is not to have the bristles actually touching the edge or the corner, but pull it down slightly like that, and then pull this over and clip it about like that so it clips just the tip of the brush. Now that may require a little bit of trial and error, because sometimes if you clip it too far down, it's going to make the whole edge of the thing kind of curl a little bit. So you need to clip it so that it clips only maybe about a quarter of an inch down, maybe not much further than that. And with a little bit of experimenting, you can find the right place for that. So when you do that again, just sandwich that together and clip it. Kind of like that. That's good. And then put it in a container, let it dry let it dry at least overnight Sometimes I will let mine to be sure they're really, really good and dry. If they need to be conditioned like that, I will dry them, let them dry over a couple of nights to be sure. But still, when that process is finished and they're nice and dry, I think you'll find they'll be in good shape. And then you need to do that same thing always when you're shaping your brushes like that. Before you start painting, be sure that all that soap is out. And that will flip. Sometimes you can see those little particles of a soap floating in the air when you do this sort of thing. But you see how this brush holds its shape? See now what I can do there, and it always goes back to its shape. So that is my method for reshaping your brushes so they can always be a good working tool for you. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianneMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.